Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to some Civil War poetry. We are on episode 9. Cheers to that. My name is Vincent, and I'm coming to you live from Minneapolis, Minnesota. And what do we do before we get started? Is the coffee hot? Just perfect. Just freaking perfect. We will move on to our next thing, which is simply called This Day in Civil War History. Excited about this one. In 1861, the Confederate States of America and the Creek Indians concluded a treaty. I think that's really interesting to know that, to think about how the native tribes were split in their loyalties. And I did just a quick search, and I read that the Creek Nation was particularly split, and 6,000 did join the Confederate forces. Of course, let's see here. Their alliance with the Confederates was disastrous to their nation. In 1866, they ceded 3 million acres of their domain in the Indian Territory to the United States for 30 cents an acre. So definitely kind of screwed over. However, in recent and contemporary news yesterday, check this out when you have time. Yesterday, the Supreme Court ruled that nearly half of the state of Oklahoma is still, in fact, Native American territory, which I think that's pretty great and pretty cool. And I won't get too much into Native history. I find it super fascinating, and I would highly recommend the book Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee by D. Brown. Definitely check that one out. Our Civil War quote for the day is, "War is cruelty. There is no use trying to reform it. The crueler it is, the sooner it will be over." And I know who said that one. I'll tell you here in a second why. But that was Union General William T. Sherman before his march through Georgia. And I'll tell you why I know that one, because last night I came across a great documentary on YouTube called When Georgia Howled. It's produced by the Georgia Public Broadcasting. So it's only an hour long, super high quality production quality, super educational. Check that one out as well. Moving on, for those who are joining us for the first time, this is where I get into the poetry section of the program. I'll begin by reading, just catching up on what we did yesterday and reading the bios of the authors that we featured. Yesterday, we featured a poem by a friend of the pod. This isn't a podcast yet, but maybe it will be. I just like saying that. Friend of the pod, Oliver Wendell Holmes Sr., featured him on an earlier episode, maybe 2, I believe. But he was born in 1809, died in 1894, was born in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and educated in Andover, Boston, and Paris. Although a prominent physician and professor of anatomy, he achieved greater fame as a poet of national prominence. His son, Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., served in the 20th Massachusetts Volunteer Infantry. Great American family there for sure. The other poet we featured from the Confederate side, his name was James Ryder Randall. He was born in 1839, died 1908, was born in Baltimore. Ill health prevented him from serving in the conflict, but he wrote much in support of the Confederacy. After the war, Randall settled in Augusta, Georgia, where he became editor-in-chief of The Constitutionalist. Bit of an irony in that one. Before we dive into the actual poems for this morning, just my quick spiel. The book is Poetry of the Civil War. It is divided into 2 sections, one featuring poems from the blue, one from the gray, meaning the Union forces and the Confederate forces, respectively. Each morning, I will read one from either side, do some comparing and contrasting, and maybe glean something about how people were feeling at the time about this massive traumatic conflict that was engulfing their society. Maybe we can draw parallels to today. Either way, I think it's super important when talking about history in getting the actual on the ground contemporary sources in order to analyze just kind of the facts. So here we are, at least poetically, with this collection. Our first poem is from the blue. It is another favorite poet of ours here on some Civil War poetry. She has yet to return my calls, ladies and gentlemen, Emily Dickinson, with He Fought Like Those Who've Not to Lose. He fought like those who've not to lose, bestowed himself to balls as one who for a further life had not a further use. Invited death with bold attempt, but death was coy of him, as other men were coy of death. To him, to live was doom. His comrades shifted like the flakes when gusts reversed the snow, but he was left alive because of greediness to die. And that's it. I really like this one. You can't see it, but words like coy and death and comrades, they're all capitalized. Doom is capitalized. Yeah, that's great. Emily Dickinson, everybody, give her a hand. Read everything you can by her. We'll read her bio tomorrow. Before I move on to our gray poetry of the gray, just know if you haven't seen it before, I do copy and paste the poems in the description below if you'd like to follow along. So this is called Manassas. Manassas was the name of the one of the first conflicts of the war, known in the north as the Battle of Bull Run. Yes, there were 2 of them, but in the south it is known as the Battle of Manassas. They have met at last, as storm clouds meet in heaven, and the Northmen, back and bleeding, have been driven. And their thunders have been stilled, and their leaders crushed or killed, and their ranks with terror thrilled, rent and riven. Like the leaves of Valambrosa they are lying, in the moonlight, in the midnight, dead and dying. Like those leaves before the gale, swept their legions wild and pale, while the host that made them quail stood defying. When aloft in morning sunlight, flags were flaunted, and swift vengeance on the rebel proudly vaunted. Little did they think that night should close upon their shameful flight, and rebels, victors in the fight, stand undaunted. But peace to those who perished in our passes. Light be the earth above them, green the grasses. Long shall Northmen rue the day when they met our stern array and shrunk from battle's wild affray at Manassas. And that was by Catherine M. Warfield. Strong words from Warfield following the Battle of Manassas. I don't know when this poem was written. That's research I like to do after. Unfortunately, it's not mentioned in the glossary here. But like I said, Manassas was one of the first battles. It was actually a resounding Confederate victory. And the Northmen, as it were, woke up to the fact that this wasn't going to be over in a matter of weeks. So a rousing poem from Warfield, a an on-brand, somber poem from Dickinson. Who's got the poem for today, folks? I'll leave it up to you. Tomorrow we are going to feature a poem by Herman Melville. Check him out a couple episodes ago. We are also going to feature a poem by Margaret Junkin Preston. So stay tuned, like, subscribe, share, do all that fun stuff. Get the word out, and we'll see you tomorrow with those poets. Take care, everybody.